When I was a kid, I used to love watching Saturday morning cartoons. I'd wake up early so I could see things like the Jetsons, Transformers, or if you're kind of a nerd, you might know about Voltron, which was this huge robot, yeah, Voltron, made out of smaller tiger robots. What I think I was the most excited about was the idea that someday I might have a robot of my own, a robot that could help me do chores like the laundry, dishes, or help fight bad guys. Well, what I'm here to talk to you about today are some of the key insights roboticists have made that I think are going to begin to bring robots out of the academic lab and into our lives relatively soon. But before we understand those insights, we have to understand what is it about robotics that make them so hard to or robots that make them so hard to deal with. Well, you see, robots have these big, fragile limbs, and they're connected by a relatively slow brain. It's slow compared to how fast things happen in the real world. If you think about maybe bumping an apple off of a table, in that fraction of a second, we want our robots to be able to perceive, understand, and react. Not only are they a little bit slower than we need, but they also have a great deal of uncertainty in their motors. What this means is the robots can't quite tell where their hands are. And even if they did know, each time they reach out, the hands are going to end up somewhere different. You can imagine this makes precise manipulation very difficult. Yet, if you think about it, we humans actually deal with many of the same kinds of problems. If you think about playing darts, even an expert player who's had their body their entire lives and has played a lot is going to have an extremely hard time hitting the exact same spot twice in a row. This is because of the same kinds of uncertainty that we have in our muscles, in our joints, all over our body. But we know we're actually good at doing a wide variety of manipulation tasks, and we can do them extremely reliably. So let's keep that in mind. So there is a solution out there, and take a look at what the state of the art in robotics is right now. I've recently started working with a group of brilliant engineers up at JPL on doing some robotic manipulation, and they're letting me share a video that they made of some of the work they did before I got started. What you're going to see is a robot replace a tire on an assembly. And you'll also see some cool robot vision stuff too, which is going to come up in just a second. But what I want you to pay attention to are all the fine manipulation tasks the robot has to do on the way. It has to use its palm and press it up against this impact driver it's going to use. It has to know how the impact driver is going to react in its grip, the weight as it picks it up, and the resistance as it tries to pull on the tire. In other words, it needs an internal model of the world that lets it reason about the consequences of its actions. When you reach out for a cup, you know how it's going to feel against your fingertips or how it might slide against the table. The trouble is, right now, this internal model currently lives in the minds of the engineers, and it's the subject of my research to try and bring it down into the mind of the robot. The way I'm doing this is through a framework called Bayesian reasoning. And these are the mathematics that lets you understand what could be happening based on what you see. It lets you connect cause and effect. This is remarkably powerful because it lets you connect your internal model to what's actually happening in the real world. It lets you plan for uncertainty by helping you figure out what's most likely going on at any given moment. And it lets you get around being slow by letting you plan for contingencies. Now, what's remarkable is that neuroscientists have found evidence that our brains work in similar ways. Our internal model seems to lie inside of our cerebellum, and we seem to use it in roughly the same ways as some of our robotics algorithms are beginning to. One cool example from the literature that I like, that I think illustrates sort of the implications, was how one neuroscientist tried to answer the question of why can't we tickle ourselves? The way, yeah, open question, or kind of a hard question. The way he did this is he had participants in a study use a robotic hand to actually try and tickle themselves. And what he found is that if the robotic hand kind of obeyed, we seem to use our internal model to predict what that sensation will be. And if it matches it up with what we feel, we can cancel it out. But if something unexpected happens, that uncertainty we feel manifests as this sort of surprising tickling sensation. From studies like this, we start to see that the mind works very hard to tamp down uncertainty. And I think by beginning to bring uncertainty into our calculations, our robots are going to start to be ready for all the uncertainty that's out there in the real world. I'd like to leave you with an example of just how important these advances can be. Last year, during the Fukushima nuclear disaster, in 2011, radiation levels rose so high that unfortunately they weren't able to send in humans. They sent in robots, but they were largely limited to taking videos. This year, as part of a DARPA robotics competition, I'm working with Joel Burdick and some of the guys up at JPL to develop robots that can do all the things we wish could have been done. This means robots that can turn valves, that can walk, that can even hop in a car and drive down to the site. And if we're successful, this will be a monumental shift in what robots are capable of. And we'll finally be one step closer to having a robot that can help us out with our chores. Thank you.